for taking the time to, oh, thanks. So hi everyone, thank you for taking the time to join us today for this event. We'll start with some introductions for Lorene and I, and we would ask that if you had any questions, please hold them to the end and feel free to ask them at the end or type them in the text box. And we'd be grateful if you could just keep yourself muted while the two of us are talking at the beginning and during the event too. I guess to start, I'll introduce Lorene. So Lorene is originally from California and graduated from Fordham with a Bachelor of Arts in Theology and a minor in American Studies. She's now studying for a Master of Science in International, Social, and Public Policy at the London School of Economics. Is there anything else you want to add, Lorene?
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Great. And so to introduce me as well, so my name is Badruji. I graduated from Princeton in 2020 with an AB in History and minors in African Studies, Latin American Studies, and South Asian Studies. So last year I completed an MPhil in Modern South Asian Studies at St. Edmund's College, Cambridge, and I'm currently a DPhil candidate in History at Trinity College, Oxford. So originally there was supposed to be another panelist, Mackenzie, but unfortunately she was unable to join us today. So it'll just be Lorene and I going through the list of questions today. So I guess to start, Lorene, if you don't mind, I'll ask you, so why did you come to the UK for postgraduate study? Why not stay in the US, and why didn't you consider studying elsewhere?
I would say the major factor for me was price. I think it was about half the price to study in the UK as it would have been in the United States. And then it was also just a matter of circumstance and my attraction to the particular location. I came to graduate school straight out of university. And I knew that I didn't want to spend 2 years in graduate school. I wanted to spend only 1 year, and most masters in the UK are only 1 year. So that was very attractive to me. But I guess on a cultural, geographical standpoint, I did not get to study abroad in college. And so this is a chance for me to study abroad. And what I really liked about the UK and specifically London is that it's a very international city. It's very diverse. The LSE, my school, has a reputation of being diverse. And I really wanted the opportunity to connect with people from different countries around the world. And London was a great place to do that. So I guess if you're looking for or to study in a place that's similar to the US, but different enough, I think the UK is a great starting point. You don't have the pressure of needing to learn a foreign language. I think those are the main reasons why I wanted to study in the UK specifically. And then if it's relevant later, I can talk about my program and why I chose it, but those are the main reasons.
Right. So yeah, I guess for me as well, it's also probably a combination of the two factors you mentioned as well. Because I know for me studying in the US, especially during my senior year during the pandemic, I really after undergrad finished, I really wanted to be closer to home. So I currently so my family is originally from Ireland. So studying in the UK was quite close to home, and it enabled me to travel to and from home at a much greater convenience than I was when I was in the US. And again, as Lorene mentioned, the cost and the timing of degrees here is significantly different to the US. So I know I always knew that I wanted to continue to a doctorate, whereas in the US it would take me about 6 or 7 years to finish one. Here in the UK I can finish one in 3 if I really push myself towards it. And again, the cost is a huge issue as well. So being an Irish national, I am considered as a home student in the UK. So I only have to pay whatever fees a local UK student would have to pay. Whereas in the US, again, a lot of doctoral programs would be funded. But again, if I were to take a master's and go through that route, I would have to be paying a significant amount out of pocket too. So for these reasons, the UK appealed to me a lot more than if I were just to stay in the US. So moving on to the next question. So if you don't mind me asking you, Lorene, what timeline do you advise applicants to be aware of before gathering and submitting their application materials? When do you think they should start planning and thinking about this?
So I would say I don't know, for people who are attending right now, I'm not entirely sure what stage you're in your undergraduate studies, but I would recommend at the start of junior year, you should be looking at the schools and programs that interest you. And then around summer or fall, that's when you should start reaching out to potential recommenders. I would recommend, I mean, usually you need around like 3 people, but it's always good to have a backup. So I think I reached out around, I think this was August to September for my recommenders. But ideally you would want to give your recommenders at least like 2 months notice, because like sometimes professors can get busy, or if you're asking for a recommendation from work, like your supervisors can be busy. So you just want to make sure that you get everything done in time. Most deadlines, I think if it's a US school, would be in December of that year. So if you want to do your letters 2 months in advance, you should at least be asking in October at the very latest. But I know that a lot of UK schools operate on rolling admissions processes. And so some of them will start actually admitting people as early as November. So that's why I think like the earlier, the better. Once you have all your recommenders sorted, like that's also when you can start working on your applications, like your personal statements, like any essays that you have to do for scholarship consideration at those schools. Like those are things that you're working on while you're waiting for your recommenders to get started. Then once you've like submitted your applications, like you'll probably have to wait. I mean, again, it really depends on the school, how long you have to wait. It could be months, it could be weeks, days, and if you're lucky. And I know a couple months after that is like when you start the visa process, but I don't recommend starting the visa process until you've actually like submitted your applications and gotten a decision. Like it doesn't make sense to do that and you'll be wasting your money. So I would wait a couple months after you've gotten your decisions until you start the visa process.
Were there any others among your peers while you were in college in the US who were also applying on like a similar timeline, or do you have like any kind of experience with that as well? Like others, like your friends are applying like a similar timeline or something like that?
Yeah, I know most of my peers, they actually went to work. So I think I was pretty much on my own when I was doing this. And I guess I do want to add the caveat that, around the time I was applying, it was like a peak COVID year.
Right.
And so that might have like delayed the visa decisions or like the sending of paperwork. So I do want to like factor that into consideration.
Right. Yeah. So like, I mean, I really don't have that much to add as well in terms of, as I think exactly you've hit everything on the head about when you should start thinking about like considering applying, reaching out to recommenders and preparing materials too. Yeah, I would say that like most courses, I think in the UK, they would tend to have like a December or January at the earliest, or at the latest, like a deadline for applying. So yes, I mean, it would be worth making sure to check out all the different universities and colleges here that you would want to apply to, and like double checking that their deadlines do align, or like noting how they differ. So yeah, just to make sure that you are yeah, I guess like the key thing is just to make sure that it isn't like a last minute decision to apply, because like there is a lot of time and paperwork involved in applying. So I hope that nobody considers it like a last minute decision, or like just to apply on a whim, because like preparation is definitely key for something like this.
Actually, if I could jump in and share a tip that I think my recommenders found useful. One thing that I did for each recommender was to make a spreadsheet. So in each column, I would put the school I'm applying to, and then I would, in another column, I'd put the name of the program and hyperlink the program page. And then I'd put like little check boxes, like, have I submitted my application? Has the recommender submitted their application? And that was a good way for my recommenders to track like what's been submitted and what hasn't been. And I was also able to put the date in which I needed their letters by. So like, it's a good way to, I guess, visualize like for both you and your recommender, what's being sent. And I guess like the other thing I'd add is like, I think I applied to about 10 schools, which like looks really intimidating maybe, but at least from a recommender standpoint, mostly what they're doing is just changing the name of the school and the person that they're sending it to. So it's not too much work on their end. So like, don't be afraid to make that spreadsheet if you're applying to a bunch of different places. As long as you're upfront about where you're applying, it should be fine for your recommender.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, that's some great words of advice too. Yeah, I guess like next, moving on to resources. So like, what resources were available to you to help applicants, and like what resources do you think are available at US colleges in general to help you like when you're applying?
I know in my case, at least at Fordham, I wasn't aware of any specific support for people who are applying to graduate school.
Okay.
But one thing I did rely on was my professors. So when I was considering applying for graduate school, I had a couple professors that I was close to, and then I would ask to meet with them during their office hours, just get us, and I would get a sense of like what the process of applying to grad school was like what they got out of grad school. And I guess because I had developed a relationship with them, they were willing to share that wisdom with me. So, if you have a good relationship with your professors, and, if you're going to apply for grad school, ideally you should anyway, try to schedule some office hours with them to get some wisdom about the application process and about grad school in general. But I can't unfortunately think of any resources directly available from my school, but I'm curious to know about what your experience was.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was like different. And I think again, you're right. Like, it really depend on like what school like you went to or are going to in the US. Because I know for me at Princeton, like graduate advising was a huge aspect of like the schools, like scholarships, and like wider advising in general. So there was like a dedicated office with counselors there to help you and like guide you through the process. And like I know that like that isn't the case for like other schools like that you might be attending. So, but again, like I do think even if that isn't the case, like what you said, Lorene, is like very on point too. So like your professors have also like gone through the same process, and like they know exactly like what kind of things that you would need to prepare for applications, and what kind of things that like colleges in the UK and like further beyond as well would be looking for in applicants too. So even if you don't have like a well-funded or a well-stocked or well-resourced like advising or funding office or scholarships office in your college or university, like your professors and your supervisors are definitely people that you should turn to like well in advance to who can help you think about like applications, like your CV and that kind of thing to help you move along the process. So yeah, like it really does depend on like what school and what college you do go to in the US, unfortunately.
It does. Yes.
Yeah.
And actually, if I could add, I guess just some nuance, well, first of all, I'm really glad that your university had some support for you. I think it's great. I think every university should have that. I think in my case, like, because I felt I had to look elsewhere for support, I was going online, I was looking at online forums like Grad Cafe or the Student Room, but I do have to caution people like against going on those websites or against relying totally on what people say. I think everybody is going to have an opinion about the kinds of candidates that a school admits or the quality of a personal statement. But I mean, again, these are your peers. They're not on the admissions committees. So those websites are really only helpful for administrative things like, well, when do I have to turn this in? Or like, where do I find the right contact for this? Like, don't rely on people online for help if you need to find it. If you can, if you have a peer who has gotten into graduate schools and is willing to share their personal statements with you, that would be great if you can get that, but it is quite a personal thing. Not everyone's willing to share it, but it's always better to like rely on your personal network than random people online.
No, exactly. Yeah, like what you said, like Student Room, Grad Cafe. I mean, they can be quite toxic places too if you get stuck in like just following like threads on like different colleges and like different courses and everything. So yeah, and again, like what you said too about like personal networks, that is also like very important. I should have mentioned that too, because like I had a number of friends who were in the years above me who ended up coming to the UK. And I know like reaching out to them, I mean, they were all like very helpful and giving me tips and advice too. So that, yeah, if you know anyone else from either from your college or like your personal network that has gone to anywhere in the UK, like you reaching out to them would also be very beneficial too. So yeah, I guess like now moving on, I guess like to one of the more important things, but funding. So I guess like, let me like, would you be able to share like how you found funding for like postgraduate study, or like how you thought about funding in general, or like how to look for funding, like that kind of thing?
Yeah, for sure. I guess I don't want to be too discouraging, but I will say up front that unfortunately, unlike bachelor's degrees in the US, where financial aid is quite generous, there aren't too many options for master's students. So there is the option to get, I think, some federal loans, but there is a cap on it. So you probably won't be able to fund your whole degree with those loans, but that is an option. Like they are, I think, unsubsidized if I'm remembering correctly. For alternate sources of funding, I was able to go through some honor societies. You know, everyone here is in Phi Beta Kappa, like you're probably a very good student, you're probably part of multiple honor societies. So go check your honor society's websites and see if they offer any scholarships for postgraduate study. So I was able to find something that way. You know, I'm also very grateful that my family is also able to help me out with the cost of my graduate studies. So I think that might be something that you need to do, especially if you're going straight out of university. But I think those are the main options that I found were helpful for funding my degree.
Right. So yeah, I guess like for me to add in, I guess like I have two different perspectives from like being a master's student in the UK and like also being like a PhD student in the UK. So I guess for me, being a master's student, I essentially self-funded my master's degree. So the one I was able to do that mainly because I was technically a home student, so I didn't have to pay like the full international fee. So it was a lot more manageable for me to do that. And also once I started the master's at Cambridge, I was able to apply for like a studentship. So again, from that, I got like another stipend that I was able to cover like a lot of the expenses that I had associated with the degree, but not all of it. And I think it is also worth mentioning that like a lot of master's students in the UK, I would say the majority are not actually funded. Again, it would depend on the course too. And like, yeah, again, like what specifically you were doing, but like you would find that like most master's students in the UK don't have funding. And again, for like, so again, like for the PhD, it's different again. So I was fortunate enough to find funding for my PhD, but like funding, like looking for funding for graduate study in general, and specifically for PhDs in the UK, is quite tough. And it's like it isn't really predictable as well. Like there isn't, I don't think there's a specific path or some specific things you could do to guarantee yourself funding. I think even if you talk with your supervisors about this, they would also tell you the same thing. Like I can tell you from my own experience, my supervisor at Cambridge, because I originally would have liked to have continued on to the PhD at Cambridge itself. My supervisor said, "Oh, don't worry. Like I think you have a good shot for getting funding. I wouldn't worry too much about like not getting it or like finding alternatives." And despite that, I actually didn't end up getting funding at Cambridge. So I was fortunate enough to get funding at Oxford and I came here. But again, like this, I think this shows you that the nutting is like truly guaranteed. And again, like applying during a pandemic year as well, for me at least anyway, there's a lot more applications and a lot more competition. So like again, like it's so hard to predict. And I don't think like even if someone tells you like what you can do to guarantee yourself funding, like they don't really know what they're talking about, because it's one thing to get into to like a PhD program, and it's another thing to get funding. Like I think in the US it does work differently, as in I think it's quite rare to find PhD programs in the US where you don't come with some kind of funding attached, whether that's teaching or some kind of external funding like that. Whereas in the UK, it's quite different. So, I mean, it is one thing to get into a PhD student, but like funding is definitely something you need to consider too. Like I know my supervisor told me last year that not to attempt a PhD here without funding, because it is essentially like taking on a job, like even though it is mainly research. So that is like it is something to consider when applying. And also again, like your supervisor should have like a greater understanding of like how this could impact or affect your studies. Lorraine, if there's anything you want to add to that or you can think of.
Yeah, I guess like the other thing I would add is that like merit scholarships are also quite sparse for applicants. I think they do exist at some places, but I really wouldn't count on it. So I think at the LSE, they only offer it to like maybe the top 10% of like literally all postgraduate master's students. So like the chances are slim. I mean, I didn't receive one. I mean, there were some like school scholarships that were need-based, but they were also incredibly limited. So yeah, I would just definitely take your financials into consideration. I mean, another source of funding is work. I know that's like on the horizon for our agenda, so I can get more into that later, but I also wouldn't like rely on that as your main source of funding.
Right. Yeah, I guess, like, yeah, so just moving on to the next. And again, if anyone has questions about this, like feel free to ask at the end, or I can just ask in person or like send a message in the text box. But again, yeah, like, so I'm moving now into like living needs in the UK. Like, how did you find about, like, how did you go about the process of like securing accommodation, securing like a phone contract, like a bank account, and again, like finding work, if that was something that was necessary or important for you? Like, if you don't mind like talking about that.
Yeah, for sure. So accommodation was it was fairly easy. So my school, I had like a, what do I call it? Like a portal, I guess, where you can apply for accommodation. So I was able to do that like before I actually got in the UK. I mean, which is pretty important.
Mhm.
I knew that I wanted to live in student accommodation because it felt safer. It was in a great location, and I didn't want to do the flat search like without actually being in London. So that
Mhm.
was the advantage. That's why I chose to live in student housing. As for a phone and bank account, I would say it's very difficult to do that in the US. Like it's better to do
Mhm.
that once you get there. So
Exactly.
what I did was once I got to Heathrow Airport, like I landed with all my bags, like I just went to like the vending machine and I got like the cheapest SIM card. And I used that for like about a week. And then once I actually got to my place, like that's when I applied for like a different kind of sim online that was like an even better rate. I used a company called Smarty, and like I just waited for them to send me my sim through the mail and used like my Heathrow cheapo sim card in the meantime. As for a bank account, I do know that I think you would have to go in person like to a branch to set up your bank account, and it can be quite difficult to secure an appointment. Some banks also have like very strange hours that are like really regular, so I instead went with like a digital bank account, something called Monzo. I think
Mhm.
there might be like other digital bank accounts as well, and I think they just need a UK address. I think maybe also a phone number. So definitely like do your phone first, and then do your bank account after that. And in the meantime, like you could just like rely on cash or just like, bite the bullet and take on the foreign transaction fees for like the couple weeks or so until you can like get yourself sorted. But I would say that it's fairly straightforward.
Mhm. Yeah, like one thing to add, like one thing I found different in the US versus the UK was, especially in the UK, like how interconnected all these things seem to be. Because I know
Mhm.
like when I try to open a bank account, the first thing they asked me was for like one, like proof of my student status, and two, like my tenancy agreement. So like it would like I didn't realize that like I needed to find I needed to have like a rental or like a tenancy agreement before opening a bank account, because this is with like Lloyd, so like a physical bank. And again, for the phone as well. So I prefer getting phones on contract, not like paying as you go or using SIMs like that. But then again, I found that when I tried to get like a phone, like when I tried to get a phone on contract, they wanted 3 years of like, residency in the UK, which I didn't have at the time. So I guess like one other thing you could consider is, especially in terms of like phone contracts or accommodation or like getting leases, is if you have like a friend or associate who is a British citizen, you could like have them do it on your behalf. So have everything go through them, and then like work out an arrangement with them to pay them, whether that's for like a phone or whether that's like rent or like in that way. So like there are ways that you can like make it less complicated for yourself, but like you will find that is um, like a bit more work than it was in the US. Because I know going to the US, like opening a bank account, getting a phone, like I really didn't have to think twice about it. Like it was very straightforward. Like a lot more straightforward, I think, than I was in the UK. But yeah, like it is worth like considering these things as well, because they're not something that you really think about when you're applying, or like once you're like thinking about like setting off to study in the UK. But they are like just small things that do add up too. I guess like Lorraine, like if you want, do you have any experience like trying to find work while studying, or was that something that was necessary for you as well?
So personally, I don't like. I would almost say that my university, like, not explicitly, but it seemed like they were discouraging us from working
Mhm.
alongside our studies. So I know the particular visa that I'm on is just called like a tier 4 visa. The name might have changed. I can't remember, but it only allows us to work 20 hours per week, and like that's like very strict. Like do not breach your visa. Like I will tell you that first of all. And I know that, it's quite commonplace in the US to take on an internship, like alongside your studies. But like once you get to grad school, like, I think you might realize that you have like less time than you think. Like it seems like you have a lot of free time, but because like so much of the work is independent, it would actually be like quite difficult to take on a part-time job alongside that.
Mhm.
Like I do know that some people in my program like have taken on part-time work. Like maybe some people want to do like a barista job or something like that, or like they have some part-time work that's like at the school. But I do know that it has been difficult because companies do prefer people to be able to like work full-time if possible. Yeah, I don't have any experience, unfortunately. But like, yeah, I just like would have those things in mind, like if you're planning to work alongside your studies.
Yeah, because I would tend to agree as well. Like I know like both at Cambridge and at Oxford, we were both like heavily discouraged from working, especially during term time as well.
Yeah.
Like I know like we have quite long vacation periods, and like some students do end up like working like a part-time during the vacation period. But during term time, like I would say it's almost impossible to try and balance like work commitments with academic and extracurricular stuff too. But I mean, again, I think it would depend on like what course you're doing and where you are studying too. Especially if you're studying if you end up studying part time too,
Oh, yeah.
like it would be a lot more manageable to find work. But yeah, like I guess like you would tend to see most people not like taking on a serious work commitment while they're studying, either for like a master's or a PhD. But again, like it does depend on I guess like university, the course, and like the person too. Yeah, and I guess like before trying to like open it up, Lorraine, like, do you know like could you talk about like the support international postgraduate students have in the UK like UK colleges in general? So I guess like from your experience at LSE, like what kind of support did you find for like international students?
Hmm. Oh, that's an interesting question. Um, I guess, well, from my frame of reference, like I guess like the LSE is like has a reputation of being like one of the most like
Mhm.
international schools like in the UK and like in the world, really. I think like 70% of the student body is not from the UK.
Mhm.
So in a sense, like we're most of us are international postgrads. So I guess like I can't really say that there was like tailored support, but the websites like do make it like very clear, like, oh, this is where you go if you have a general question, this is where you go if you have questions about funding. And like the school newsletters are like pretty good about signposting those resources. um I can't say that I like utilize like too many of those services, but again, like maybe it's just because like they assume that everyone's kind of from the same starting point, like being not from the UK. I do know that while this isn't directly like a form of like support per se, like there were a lot of like societies, as they call them,
Mhm.
or like clubs, as you might know them, that were focused on like nationality. Like there's like an American society, there's like a Mexican society, like there's so many different ones, and they can be like a great source of like informal support. If you're feeling homesick, you can like connect with other people like from wherever your background is. But I can't think of anything specific, but I also I'm curious to know like what your schools have offered.
Right. Yeah. So I guess like for me, it is different in a way because especially in the way like both like Cambridge and Oxford are set up, right? So like there is a university, but then like there are the specific colleges that like fall
Right.
under that umbrella too. So like everything like I mean, I tend to find like everything is a lot more like college specific, and you find like some colleges have a lot more. One, they have like a lot more postgraduate students than undergraduate students, or the other way around. And again, you also find that some colleges have a lot more like international students versus like home or like British students. So, but then again, like even if wherever you end up, especially if you end up going to Oxford or Cambridge, like there is support out there. It's especially if you want to look for it, and you will find it. Like there are again like a lot of international clubs and societies, as Lorene mentioned, and like even the student union itself, it does have like a dedicated
Oh,
international
right.
student officer. So like yeah, I mean, if there are like any ideas or initiatives you think would be beneficial for the university, or like if you're feeling homesick or problems like that, like the student union itself is also like a good place to like to turn to and to look to. So it's not a question of like you ever being like truly alone or like feeling like you're just like completely out here, like having like a different experience to everyone else. Like you'll find like a lot of other people in a similar position to you, even if they're not from like a very similar background or like have the exact same experience. So like there is support out there, and it's not like it's not. I don't think it's anything like major to be worried about. Yeah.
No, that's great. That's great advice. Like I know that I definitely felt homesick when
Mhm.
I first touched down in London. But yeah, like relying on societies, like building a social life, like were things that like really helped me feel supported.
Mhm. Yeah, so I guess like we've gone through the list that we have sample questions that we had prepared. Like I know we haven't really stuck to the timings. Like I guess it's kind of difficult when there's only two of us, but instead of three. But yeah, I guess like we'd want to open it up now to any questions or comments you might have. So like feel free to like unmute yourself and ask us, or just to type it in the text box. And yeah, like we'd be happy to respond to anything you guys might have. Like Lydia too, presenting, you feel like we want to we should mention, or like. Yeah, I mean, they can be however big or small. Like there's like no wrong question. I mean, I wish I knew a lot of this stuff too. Okay, great. I guess we can start with Caroline's question first. So for everyone else, so in your experience, or if you've talked to other people, is it easier to get a job in the UK after attending some sort of postgrad program there? I guess, I mean, Lorene, do you want to start? I guess trying to, do you have like any answer for it?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like I have to admit, I'm not really sure. I mean, I am looking to work after my master's. I have been casually looking at some jobs in London. I can't really give you a definitive answer because I haven't been looking for work, and most of my peers like haven't worked in the UK either. But I would say that if you like do get to the interview stage, I think having been to a UK school would probably be an asset. It shows that you can and maybe relate like to the working style, like that you're informed about like the political climate if you're going to a job that requires you to know about those kinds of things. But yeah, I'm sorry that I can't give you something more conclusive.
Yeah, I guess like for me too. Oh, Lydia, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, hi. So I'll just jump right in. To clarify that answer, yes, of course. I mean, the postgraduate degree here is very highly respected, and it's also obviously easier to look for a job once you're on the ground. You will now be able to work on a visa for anybody who has graduated from postgraduate course in the UK for what I believe is a period of 2 years, but you will be expected to fund your NHS care, which I believe is something like £1,000 a year. Lauren, did you have to pay your NHS precept?
I did. I can't remember how much it was. I thought it was less than 1,000, but it might be different after I'm not a student. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, but yeah, it is very possible. It's becoming much easier than it was before. One thing I could add as well is that if you wanted to come to the UK and try it before you applied to graduate school, if you've applied or if you attended one of the top 50 universities in the world, you can also apply for a visa that again I think gives you 2 years of work experience. Do check the website on visa guidance. And then you can apply while you are here, which is another way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, because as someone who's looking to go into academia, I haven't really thought about job hunting or anything like outside of academic like related things. So yeah, like I really don't have any kind of like meaningful answer to it. So I guess like what Lorene and Lydia says would be a lot more on point. Yeah, okay, so like moving on to the next question in the chat. So as I mentioned, thank you for your time. I'll be at Oxford in the fall and didn't obtain funding for my master's. Can you speak more to potential studentships or additional funding post-matriculation at Oxford? Thank you. I guess I'll answer first specifically for Oxford or Cambridge, and then I can open it out to like funding after starting studies at any UK college in general. So I guess like, yeah, for like Oxford or Cambridge, there really isn't a lot of like studentship or like additional funding you can find once you've like matriculated or started your course there. So like there are some, as in, so I got funding from like a Center of History and Economics at Cambridge. That was more so to do with the kind of research I was doing because it aligned with what the center's vision was. But it certainly wasn't enough to cover like everything, and it was like a very small amount, and it was more so in the form of like grants for different things. So like you should check out the like the fees and funding pages of both Oxford and Cambridge. They do list like all the possible sources that are out there for funding. And like another thing you could do is like I don't know how common it is anymore because like my parents were both postgraduate students in the UK too. So my mother, even though she didn't get funding, this is back in the late 90s, she went to a lot of charities. So you'll find that charities in the UK, they also have like support in the form of scholarships and like smaller grants that you could avail of, especially if it's for like a master's. You'll find out you can get like a variety of different like grants and scholarships that can build up. But again, like it is quite difficult, I would say, like especially now, like in like 2022 to find, because like everything having gone up in price, it is quite difficult to find like meaningful amounts of money once you've started. So I guess like Lorene, like do you have any other insights about getting funding after starting at like LSE or anywhere else?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything substantive I could add. I think usually like, yeah, scholarships like you would be done at like the time of entering the university rather than afterwards. I mean, there might be like some TA-ships or studentships that pop up if that's something that you're interested in, but like I don't know about any other sources of that would provide like even more funding than that.
Yeah, each university should have a hardship fund. So if you do find that you run into an emergency situation, there's usually support for that, but I think it's fairly limited to that. Badriji, I saw a question from somebody who is applying with a gap in their
Right.
academic, career as such. Should I answer that?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so for the sake of everybody, I'm Lydia Dye Stonebridge. I'm the chair of the London Association, but I'm actually returning to do a master's myself this October after a 20-year gap. So if you think it's too late, it's not. For me, so I'm going to go to UCL. So for me, my two recommendations, one was a professional contact, and the other one was just somebody who knew a bit more about why I was passionate about the field that I applied for, which is philosophy of education. So it was somebody I've done some charitable work for. So you don't have to, I mean, I do know some of my professors are still teaching, which amazes me because they were in their 60s when I took them. So I think they're still in their 80s. But no, you can get them from anybody who's relevant. I mean, I think the thing is that I think it's best if they can speak to your personal statement. So, of course, do share that with them. And they need to affirm that your motivations for studying that specific course at that specific university are true and authentic, is the advice I would give.
Great. So somebody else had asked in the chat. So I just finished my junior year and I'm heading into my senior year. Would I be able to apply this year, or has the deadline passed already? You said something about December deadline. So like, no, like you still have, even if you're heading into your senior year now, you still have all the fall semester to reach out to your professors and get all your application materials ready. So yeah, I know for Oxford and Cambridge, December and January tend to be the deadlines for starting the next fall. So if you were to start in the fall of 2023, December and January would be the deadlines. They would tend to be the deadlines you'll be working towards. And like you still do have a lot of time, especially if you're thinking about this now, but with like the rest of the summer coming up too, to think about reaching out to professors and preparing application materials. One thing you should seriously think about too is like other sources of funding and scholarships that might have a different deadline to like your course. So like I know for Rhodes, I think if you're like a US applicant for Rhodes, like you really need to have this like done and sorted by, like I'm not sure exactly, I think it's like July or August. So yeah, like that is also something to be considering too. But in terms of like the actual application itself, no, you still have like plenty of time, and it's not something that you should be like worried about not being ready in time or anything. Lorene, or Lydia, if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, I guess to add something, I know, so at least like the LSE, I don't think they close their applications at December, January. They continue accepting people until their programs are full. So yeah, if you are applying like on the later end of things, like it's worth checking to see if there are schools that operate on like rolling admissions policies. I know at the LSE, their website, it'll say like whether the program is still open or closed. So like so I guess if that will provide you with a little bit of like I guess cushioning if you're applying a little bit later, but as Badriji said, like you should be perfectly fine with your timeline.
Yeah, one thing I would add though is when you apply, you might be giving a timeline from the institution. I would suggest that you're flexible about that. It might be that you find out quite quickly, or in my case, I found out about 90 days after applying that they needed a copy of my marriage certificate to prove that my name on my college transcript, which was Lydia Dye, was the same as Lydia Dye Stonebridge. And only then would they start to process my application. So I do advise some patients and as well doing it as early as possible. But again, if you have left it a little bit later or you just want to take a punt on something, there's no harm. I don't, there is an application fee, but it's not hefty. I think I paid something like £40 to apply, which I think is equivalent roughly to about 55 US dollars. So, I think it's also just bearing in mind like what course you're applying for. Obviously, economics at LSE is going to be far more competitive and fill up much faster than, philosophy courses at maybe some of the UK's less
Mhm.
selective university.
Right. I guess like, and one of the next questions is also like Oxford specific. So yeah, I'll be at Oxford for one semester this fall for undergrad. Is there anything I should do academically while I'm there if I'm considering applying to masters at Oxford, like reaching out to professors? I mean, yeah, that is definitely something that would be beneficial because like once you're here, especially if you're studying abroad, like you will be taking classes and things with professors here. So like it is a lot easier to form a relationship with them once you're here in person rather than over email or like over some kind of virtual platform. And yeah, I mean, that would certainly help. And it would be like of a benefit to you. I wouldn't say it's like absolutely necessary to find to like be here and like root out every single professor you think would be like key to you securing like a place or anything. Because like they still do look at the wider picture of like who you are, like your academic record and like what you want to study and what your like, capabilities are. But yeah, like it certainly would help to reach out to, like if I was in your position, I would definitely also think about reaching out to professors too. So yeah, that is something that I would definitely think about doing. So yeah, that is a good point.
Yeah, I
Um,
think they really do recommend pre-application inquiries is what they say.
yeah, for
If,
anywhere really. Yeah.
yeah, if they're famous, they're probably busy. Just one to bear in mind, but maybe find somebody who's in the faculty that's it's exactly what you're looking to study. I saw one question about the GRE.
Mhm.
I did take the GRE and I applied 20 years later with my score. I was very fortunate that my mom kept a record of them. Um, I don't know how much of a bearing it actually had on my application, but they did ask for it. So I would say, do take it. I think it's like it is with the SAT and ACT where you score optional. I think you can apply with other things, but I think it's helpful to take it um, anyway in case you're looking. If you don't quite find a match in the UK, it just keeps doors open for the US. There weren't any UK specific tests that I took. Was that true of, I know Oxford and Cambridge often can have their own
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's nothing.
selection criteria.
I know for me, there was nothing really additional I needed to do. I know for Oxford and Cambridge, especially if you're applying for like science or engineering based courses, they wouldn't probably interview you before. Even after you submit your applications, they would probably tend to interview you before giving you a place. But for the humanities and social sciences, I don't think that's as common unless there's something that they want to clarify or clear up with you before. But yeah, again, I don't think there's a specific like test like that in general that you would take. Like I would agree. Like if you're also considering applying to the US too, like taking the GRE is definitely something that I wouldn't be harmful or anything. But again, like I don't think even if you take it, you have to report it to the UK colleges if you end up applying. So like it's fine. Like Lorraine, if there's anything you want to add too.
Yeah, because actually it's quite interesting because in my case, like they didn't ask for it at all. So it wasn't even like a test optional thing. It's just that they didn't want it, if that makes sense. But I guess it now that I'm hearing like what you and Lydia have to say, yeah, it would be worth like checking the programs to see what they require. But maybe it was just for my specific program that they didn't want it. But yeah, it is worth taking for if you're applying to like other places.
Um, yeah, sure,
So
sorry.
a question about reaching out to professors explicitly. I didn't reach out at all. It wasn't part of my application process. I think professors are they're quite helpful, but they're also quite clued up in terms of applicant interest. Um, but yeah, in terms of honing your personal statement to make it very specific to why you want to study that specific course at that specific institution, I think do so. Or, in the very least, at least read sort of what is getting published from that particular department, and then you'll understand the emphasis of their own, research strategy, which again, you would only benefit from putting that into your personal statement. But again, be authentic, of course.
Doreen, anything you want to add?
Yeah, if I could
Yeah.
add something, I'm very curious to get your perspective on this too, Badraji. I
Mhm.
guess it's about stating your research intent in your personal statement. Because I'm curious to know if it's different at Oxbridge. I know that in my case, at the LSE, it wasn't mandatory to state exactly what you want to research, but I would say
Mhm.
that it's helpful. I know it, and this is my personal experience. At the LSE, you're not tied to what you say you want to research. You're not committing yourself to that. I think the universities are just more interested in hearing how you think about research questions and topics, and how that program might help you. That you might find, and this is what happened to me, that once you start taking your courses, your research interests change.
Mhm.
And so I didn't reach out to professors before I applied. I think they asked me not to, I think. But again, it may be different at other places. But my experience was that, I didn't, I wasn't tied to what I had stated in my statement. But I do want to know what your experience is
Yeah.
in Oxford, if it's more formal there.
Right. So again, I would say that again, it does depend on whether you're applying for a master's or a doctorate for a PhD.
Right.
So for a master's, again, like the earlier question, yeah, it is beneficial, as in if there is someone you can reach out to, I still would, and that would only help your application. But again, as you said, it really isn't as having someone that you want to work with for a master's isn't really as crucial to the success of your application. I know from my master's course last year, there were some of my friends, other students, who didn't actually have a supervisor until halfway through the course. So they didn't reach out to anyone before. They didn't even have a supervisor starting off the course, and they still managed to do fine. Because as you said, it's more about what your interests are and what you want to get out of the course, rather than having very specific thing you want to look at and then working on that all the way through. I think that said, for the PhD, even I can't remember explicitly in the application for both Oxford or Cambridge whether they wanted you to list who you wanted to work with. But I mean, that is for a PhD, you almost certainly should find either one or a number of professors that you would be interested in working with, and reach out to them before. And that's mainly because of the key thing is, because for humanities at Oxford or Cambridge, they don't actually interview you before. Reaching out to the supervisor is really the only way that they know anything on a more personal level about you than they would have if they just interviewed you completely separately. And again, because the research proposal is really what's key at this stage in your application for a PhD, it is helpful to reach out with the proposal to a potential supervisor beforehand, so that you can instantly know whether they'd be supportive of your application, or what they think of it, or if they think that you're better suited to work with someone else. I know from my own experience at Oxford, so there was one professor I really wanted to work with. He was really in my field. He knew a lot about what I wanted to do, and he was quite well known. But the thing was, when I reached out to him, he told me that even though he would have loved working with me, he just had too many students, and there was no way that he'd be able to take me on. But what he was able to do was to refer me to another professor who was also maybe not so much in the area that I wanted to do, but was still very knowledgeable about the wider field. And she actually ended up having no students. So she was more than happy to take me on, because one, she was familiar with my research and knew what could be done with it. And again, she was completely free up having no other students to supervise. So and you'd find out by reaching out to professors like that, you can easily find what you can and can't do at a particular place. So I mean, yeah, for a PhD, almost certainly you should find professors that you'd want to work with and reach out to them before you've finally submitted all your application materials. Yeah.
Did anybody else have any questions, or I mean, please feel free to unmute yourself, and there are only just a few of us. I think there's 16 of us or so in this forum, so please feel free to chat with us live. although we're very happy to take any extra questions. Any more? Okay, well, just to add that we will be sharing the recording of this conversation with everybody at the end. We also do have a number of resources and links to scholarship sites on our website, which is pbkldn.org, which you can see here. If you do find yourself in London, please do reach out to us. We do host a number of social events through the year now that we can, which is great to be back doing that. And we have also a number of virtual groups. So if you end up at St. Andrews in Scotland, or you end up in Cardiff in Wales, you can still be part of our association virtually and in person as and when you're able to manage to travel. A huge thank you to Badraji, who's done this for the second time, and also an enormous thank you to Lorene, who is still quite new and I just sort of grabbed with two hands and has been absolutely phenomenal and wonderfully articulate about the benefits of coming to study here in the UK. So I hope you got the information you needed. You have our email address if anything kind of springs to mind later on. Otherwise, enjoy your evening and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Again, as Lydia said, if you have any questions, follow up, just like feel free to email either of us and we'd be happy to answer them. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.